No one showed up to donate blood for my 7-year-old son's heart surgery. 3 days later, I learned my mother and sister had collected $59,420 using his hospital photo to pay for a luxury wedding. Then they tried to claim everything his late father had left behind. Mrs. Ward, the signature on this form says you did. I stood in the hallway outside my son's hospital room, phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt, and I felt something in my chest go very quiet and very cold at the same time. Read it to me, I said, word for word. Robert Chen had been a branch manager at Pacific Trust for 11 years. He'd walked me through refinancing my mortgage after my husband died. He'd called me by my first name for the better part of a decade. I had never once heard his voice shake until that morning. It's a general durable power of attorney, he said, dated 14 months ago. It names Diane Ward as attorney in fact over your accounts and your minor son's trust account. It has a notary seal. It has what appears to be your signature. I've never seen that document in my life. I believe you, he said, but your mother and sister are standing at my desk right now, and they're asking me to release funds under it. I looked through the small window in Miles's door. He was asleep, his stuffed fox tucked under his chin, a line running into the back of his hand. 3 days out from open heart surgery, and the machines beside him were the only thing in that room I fully trusted anymore. Don't release anything, I said. Don't confirm anything. Don't even tell them I called. I won't. Mrs. Ward, I need you to come in today, and you should probably bring a lawyer. I hung up and stood there in that fluorescent hallway, and I thought about the fact that 4 days ago, I would have described my mother as overbearing, maybe a little self-centered, definitely bad with boundaries, not a forger, not someone capable of walking into a bank with a fake notarized document naming herself the legal controller of my dying son's money. I had been wrong about a lot of things that week. That was only the first one I could prove. I should back up. My name is Rachel Ward. I'm 34. I've spent the last 6 years working as a claims auditor for a regional insurance carrier, which is a polite way of saying I spend my days reading documents very closely to find the places where the numbers don't match the story. It is not a glamorous job. It has, however, made me extremely good at noticing when something has been altered, backdated, or quietly changed to benefit the person holding the pen. My husband David died 3 years ago. Cardiac arrest, 39 years old, no warning, gone before the paramedics finished loading him into the ambulance. He left a life insurance payout, a modest house with an actual paid-down mortgage, and a 7-year-old son who inherited his father's crooked smile and, we would later learn, a congenital heart defect that had been quietly worsening under the surface for years. Miles's condition, a narrowing valve that had been watch and wait since he was 4, reached the point where watching and waiting ran out of runway. His cardiologist, Dr. Elena Farouche, had been treating him since he was a baby. She sat across from me in her office in March with an MRI on the screen behind her and said the word surgery in the calm, practiced way doctors say words they've said 1,000 times and still mean every time. The surgery would require a blood donation match from family, not strictly medically mandatory given the hospital's own blood bank, but St. Catherine's ran a directed donation program for pediatric cardiac cases, and Dr. Farouche recommended it strongly for a 7-year-old with Miles's specific antigen profile. My mother, Diane, and my sister, Lauren, both matched. Both volunteered immediately, loudly, and on camera. I want to be fair here, because fairness is the thing I do for a living. My mother has never been a warm woman, but she had, for most of my life, shown up. She'd come to Miles's birthday parties. She'd sat in the front row at David's funeral, dry-eyed but present. My sister Lauren was 29, engaged to a man named Todd Brennan who worked in commercial real estate, and had spent the better part of the last year deep in wedding planning. Mood boards, venue tours, a group chat literally titled Lauren's Big Day that I had muted after the 40th notification about tablecloth swatches. Neither fact seemed disqualifying. People get married. People also apparently get married while telling you they'll be somewhere else. They went to the donor center together in April. They posted a photo outside it, matching testing bracelets, arms slung around each other, captioned, "Whatever it takes for our brave boy." Lauren wrote a longer post the same week. Some people ask why I'm postponing dress fittings this month, because family comes first. Always. Brave Miles. I saved that post. I didn't know yet that I'd need it. I just had the vague, uncomfortable habit, the one that comes from years of reading claims files, of keeping receipts on things that felt performative. Surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday in early June. Both my mother and Lauren confirmed, separately over text, that they'd be at the hospital by 5:30 a.m. At 6:05 a.m., my son squeezed my hand and asked if Grandma was coming soon. She wasn't. Neither of them were. And I want you to sit with that detail the way I had to, because everything that came after only makes sense once you understand that it started with 2 women who had every opportunity to simply be honest with a 7-year-old and chose silence instead. I called my mother 4 times between 6:00 and 6:20, straight to voicemail every time. The kind of straight to voicemail that means a phone has been powered off, not missed. I called Lauren. Same thing. I told myself it was traffic. I told myself maybe there'd been an accident on the 405, that any minute my phone would light up with an apologetic call from the shoulder of the freeway. People are late. People have emergencies. I built the excuse for them before they'd even asked me to. Dr. Farouche came in at 6:25 with a gentle doctor face, the one that's trying not to alarm you while delivering information that is, in fact, alarming. "Mrs. Ward, we can't hold the OR slot much longer. If the donor family isn't here, we'll proceed with hospital bank blood. It's a fine option, but I need a decision in the next few minutes." I looked down the hallway one more time. Empty. No grandmothers with blankets, no aunts with balloons, just me and a nurse named Tria who'd been kind enough to bring me a coffee I hadn't asked for and hadn't touched. "Use the bank blood," I said. "Don't wait for them." They rolled rolled Miles back holding his stuffed fox, the one David had bought him at the zoo gift shop 2 months before he died, worn soft at one ear from 3 years of being slept on. Miles looked back at me over the shoulder of the orderly pushing his bed. "Tell Aunt Lauren I was brave," he said. I smiled until the doors closed, and then I found the nearest empty family bathroom, and I did not smile at all. I texted both of them the surgery had started without them. No response for 3 more hours. I told myself, again, that something must have genuinely happened. That's the shape denial takes when you love people. You keep building bridges out of nothing because the alternative is admitting the bridge was never going to be built. 7 hours later, Dr. Farouche came out and said the word I'd been rehearsing how to survive hearing in either direction. Stable. Not perfect. Not fully in the clear yet. There'd be a recovery window where infection risk and valve response both mattered, but stable and alive and off the table. I sat in the recovery room chair and finally let myself shake for a solid 2 minutes, and then I picked myself up because that's what the next 3 days required. That evening, my mother texted, "Sorry, honey, things got complicated. How's our brave boy?" Our boy. Lauren followed a minute later. "This week has been so emotional for me. Sending all my love." For her. It had been emotional for her. I told myself, loop 2 rationalization, that maybe there'd been a family emergency on their end that they simply hadn't explained yet. Grief makes you generous with your excuses for other people even when they've stopped earning it. I typed back a simple, "He's stable. Where were you this morning?" and got nothing for 11 hours. I called my mother directly the next morning and asked her point blank what happened. She said, "We didn't want to overwhelm you with logistics while you were dealing with Miles," which is not an answer, and I noted, the auditor in me noted, that it was also not a denial. 3 days into recovery, my cousin Priya, not the nurse, a different Priya, my mother's sister's daughter, whom I hadn't spoken to in probably a year, sent me a link with no message attached, just the link. It was a GoFundMe. Title: "Help Save Our Brave Little Nephew, Miles's Heart Surgery Fund." The photo was Miles at the lake 2 summers earlier, ice cream melting down his chin, sun in his hair. A photo from my private Facebook, one I'd posted to an audience of maybe 40 people, none of whom, as far as I knew, included strangers with $15,420 to give away. The text under the photo read, in part, "Our family has been by Miles's side every single step of this journey. Surgery costs have been overwhelming, and as a family, we're asking for help covering what insurance won't." It was signed Diane Ward and Lauren Ward Brennan. 211 donors, $15,420 raised. I sat with my laptop on my knees in the recovery room and read every comment, praying for this brave little boy, sending strength to this beautiful family. What a wonderful mother and aunt, staying so strong. Old co-workers of mine, a neighbor I waved to but had never actually spoken to. A woman from David's old office who wrote, "David would be so proud of how his family has rallied." They meant every word. That was the part that made my hands go cold, more than the number did. 211 people had opened their wallets in good faith for my son, and every dollar of it was sitting in an account that had nothing to do with his hospital bill, which, I should say clearly, was already covered under my insurance plan up to a deductible I'd already paid in April. There was no shortfall. There was no gap. There was only a fabricated one, built on my son's photo, with my mother's name signed at the bottom like a receipt. Physical reaction. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the laptop down twice before I could keep scrolling. Failed fix attempt. I clicked report fundraiser through GoFundMe's own flagging system, selected unauthorized use of images, fraudulent fundraiser, and submitted it with a 2-line explanation. Then I sat and waited for something to happen, which, I would learn, takes longer than you'd hope when you need it to happen immediately. That same night, unable to sleep in the recliner beside Miles's bed, I did the thing you're not supposed to do and opened Lauren's Instagram. She'd posted at 6:47 a.m. the morning of the surgery, 17 minutes after Miles went under. The photo, Lauren in a bridal boutique, arms out, laughing, wrapped in white lace that hadn't been altered yet, the tag still visible at the hem if you zoomed in, which I did. My mother stood beside her holding a flute of champagne, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The picture of a woman overcome with joyful tears. Caption: "Miracles happen when family comes together." I read that caption maybe 15 times. Miracles happen when family comes together. They weren't in a hospital hallway holding vigil. They were 40 minutes away in a boutique fitting room, toasting a dress, at the exact moment a surgeon had my 7-year-old's chest open on a table. I thought about every Family Helps Family lecture my mother had given me over the years, usually right before asking to borrow money she never repaid, or right after Lauren had used her authorized user card on my mother's account for something that had nothing to do with an emergency. I thought about the fact that "family comes together" was apparently a caption reserved for the moments family was very deliberately somewhere else. This wasn't neglect. Neglect would have been forgivable even. This was two women who had built an entire public narrative, a fundraiser, a caption, a donor center photo op from 2 months earlier, designed to make themselves look devoted while being anything but at the one moment devotion actually mattered. I felt something in my stomach that wasn't quite nausea and wasn't quite rage, some third thing that sits underneath both. I sent my mother a single text. I saw the boutique photo, timestamped 6:47 a.m. Explain that to me. She left me on red for 6 hours and then called Lauren instead of me, which I only know because Lauren, in a moment of panic, forwarded me a screenshot meant for someone else entirely, a group chat titled Mom Buzz Lore that read, "Rachel's asking questions. Don't respond yet. Let me handle it. Let me handle it," as if I were a claims file, as if I were the problem to be managed rather than the mother of the child they'd used as a prop. I want to tell you the moment moment I stopped being sad and started being methodical, because it matters, and because it's the moment the second half of this story becomes possible. It was 11 p.m., Miles asleep beside me, monitors beeping their steady rhythm, and I opened my banking app and transferred my mother 50 cents. In the memo line, I wrote, "Buy a veil. Petty. I'll own that." It was also the last purely emotional thing I did in this entire ordeal, because right after I hit send, the auditor in me took back the wheel, and the auditor in me does not do petty. The auditor in me does documentation. I opened a blank note on my phone and started a timeline. Every text, every timestamp. The donor center photo, dated. The surgery start time, pulled from my own hospital check-in paperwork. The boutique post, 6:47 a.m., screenshotted with the metadata intact. The fundraiser, screenshotted in full. Every comment, every dollar amount. The family has been by his side, every step line highlighted in yellow. Then I called Pacific Trust to ask a routine, boring question about a linked card alert I'd gotten days earlier and hadn't thought twice about. A small charge from Lauren's authorized user card on my mother's account, one I assumed was unrelated. That's when Robert Chen told me about the power of attorney. That's the phone call I opened this story with. That's the moment the ground actually moved. I drove to the bank with Miles's discharge still 4 days out, and my sister-in-law, Priya, the nurse, not the cousin, small world, watching him for the 2 hours I needed. I brought every screenshot on my phone and a folder I'd printed at the hospital's business center at 2 a.m. because insomnia is at least occasionally productive. Robert met me in a side office, not his usual desk, and closed the door before he even said hello. "They're not here right now," he said. "They left an hour ago, angrier than I've seen anyone leave this branch." I told them the account was under review and no funds would move until we verified the POA. He slid the document across the desk. A general durable power of attorney, my name at the top as principal, my mother's name as attorney in fact, dated 14 months prior, which put it squarely in a window when I could account for my exact location every single day, because I keep a work calendar with the obsessive precision of someone paid to notice inconsistencies for a living. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Carla Ibarra. I didn't recognize the name. I photographed the seal number. "I've never met this notary," I said. "I was at a claims conference in Sacramento the date this was supposedly signed. I have hotel records." Robert nodded slowly. "Then we have a forgery problem, not a family dispute. That changes what department handles this." He paused. "I have to be honest with you, Mrs. Ward. I like your mother. She's been a client here almost as long as you have. But my job is the document in front of me, and this document doesn't hold up. That's the thing about institutions. And it's a thing I've learned from both sides of my career. They don't care about family loyalty. They care about paper. And for once, that indifference was exactly what I needed." Detective Marcus Chen, no relation to Robert, a coincidence that would have been funny in any other week, had 19 years with the county sheriff's department, the last 6 in the financial crimes unit. I met him 4 days after the bank visit, in a beige interview room that smelled like old coffee, with my folder of screenshots organized by date and my discharge papers proving where I'd been every day for the previous month. "Walk me through it from the start," he said, and I did. The surgery, the silence, the fundraiser, the boutique photo, the POA. He took notes in handwriting I couldn't read upside down, which is a skill I do actually have, and stopped me twice to ask for exact timestamps. "The forged POA is the piece that moves this out of civil court and into criminal," he said. "Fraud, forgery, and depending on what we find with fundraiser money, potentially wire fraud if funds crossed state lines through the payment processor, which, given GoFundMe's servers, they likely did." He tapped the boutique screenshot. "This is good corroborating context, but it's the notary stamp that's going to break the case. Forged notarizations leave a trail. Notaries keep logs. If this Carla Ibarra exists and didn't actually notarize this, we'll know within a week. And if she doesn't exist at all, then someone bought a fake stamp online, which is its own charge, and a dumber crime than forging a real notary's signature, which tells me something about who we're dealing with." He almost smiled. "In my experience, people this confident usually aren't as careful as they think they are." He was right. It took 4 days. Sandra Kowalski, CPA and forensic accountant with 22 years specializing in family financial disputes and elder fraud cases, was the second person Detective Chen brought in, technically retained by my attorney, but working in close coordination with his investigation once the fraud crossed into fundraiser proceeds. I hired an attorney the same week. Priya Anand, family and elder law litigator, 11 years in practice, referred to me by Dr. Farouche's own office manager, who'd apparently seen this exact flavor of family financial exploitation before, just usually pointed at elderly parents instead of grieving widows. Priya was blunt in our first meeting, in the good way. "Forget the emotional narrative for a second," she said. "Legally, we have 3 separate exposures for your mother and sister: forgery of a notarized instrument, fraud by wire in connection with the GoFundMe proceeds, and, this is the one people forget, the fact that your mother is now trying to use the fraudulent POA to claim guardianship-adjacent control over Miles's trust, which was established under David's estate." That last part I hadn't fully processed yet, and it's the part that made the room tilt a little. The trust. David's trust for Miles, funded by his life insurance and structured. This was the detail that had made my mother's eyes light up years ago in a way I hadn't understood until now. To release a significant portion of its principal when Miles turned 18, with smaller discretionary distributions available before then for medical and educational needs. Distributions that required sign-off from the trust's named co-trustee. Me, I was the co-trustee. Alongside, on paper, my mother, a decision David and I had made together years earlier, back when, in case something happens to both of us, felt like an abstraction instead of an instruction manual for exactly this. mess. If the POA had gone unchallenged, Priya said, your mother could have argued incapacitation or absence on your part and petitioned to act unilaterally as trustee. That's not a small ask. That's not $15,000 from strangers. Depending on how the trust documents were drafted, that could be access to six figures. Sandra Kowalski put it in numbers a week later, after subpoenaing the relevant account records with Priya's help. The GoFundMe proceeds, $15,120, moved from the fundraiser's payout account into a joint account held by Diane Ward and Lauren Ward Brennan 4 days after the campaign closed, she said, sliding a printed statement across the table, line items highlighted in 3 different colors. Within 9 days, $11,200 of that went to a venue deposit at the Wilmington Estate, a wedding venue under Lauren's name. Another $2,800 went to a bridal boutique, Verona Bridal, matching the timestamp of the Instagram post you flagged. She looked up. The remaining money is still sitting in the account untouched, which actually helps us. It means restitution is recoverable, not spent into nothing. And the trust? I asked. No unauthorized distributions went out, yet the forged POA was rejected at Pacific Trust before it could be used anywhere else. But she did attempt to present it at a second institution. Sandra slid another document across. A private wealth office that manages a portion of the trust's investment account. They also declined and, this is the useful part, they kept a copy of the POA and logged the date and time of the attempt. That's a second forged document presentation, which is a second count. Detective Chen, when I called to update him, put it plainly. Your mother didn't just want the wedding money. The fundraiser was the appetizer. The POA was the actual target. Long-term access to a trust that's going to be worth a lot more than $15,000 in 11 years. She just got greedy on the timeline and tried to use the forged document before the surgery money had even finished causing a mess. I sat with that for a long time. Not the wedding. The wedding I could almost, in some exhausted corner of my brain, categorize as garden variety selfishness. But the trust. The idea that somewhere in the last 14 months, my mother had looked at her grandson's medical trust, money meant to carry him through the parts of his life his father wasn't alive to fund, and decided that was a door worth forging a key for. Here is where it got complicated in a way none of the documentation could fix on its own. 10 days after the surgery, with Miles home and recovering, doing slow laps around the living room holding his stuffed box, my mother showed up at my front door. Alone. No lawyer, no Lauren, just her. In the same cardigan she'd worn to David's funeral, looking smaller than I remembered. Rachel, please, let's talk before this goes any further. I can fix this. I had exactly what Priya had told me not to do sitting right in front of me. The temptation to let her in, hear her out, let the story soften around the edges the way it always had before. My mother has a particular gift for making her worst decisions sound like misunderstandings, and standing on my porch with Miles napping upstairs, I felt the old gravity of that gift pulling at me. Priya had also told me exactly what to say if this happened. Anything you want to say it to my attorney. I'm not discussing an active criminal matter on my porch. Criminal, she repeated, like the word had personally offended her. Rachel, I'm your mother. You forged my signature on a legal document to try to take control of my son's medical trust while he was in surgery, I said. I don't know what to call that except what it is. I would never have actually used it against Miles. It was insurance, in case something happened to you. I was protecting the family. You used the fundraiser money for Lauren's venue deposit. She didn't answer that one. She looked past me into the house instead, and for one disorienting second, I thought she might try to push past me to see him, and something in my body went very still and very ready in a way I didn't know it could. I have 24 hours before Detective Chen executes a warrant on the joint account, I said, which was true. Sandra had confirmed it that morning, and the freeze was already partially in place pending the account being formally seized as evidence. After that, whatever's left in there gets locked down as part of a criminal case, and it stops being a family conversation and starts being a courtroom one. If you have anything to say, today's the day to say it to an attorney instead of to me. She left without saying anything else. I watched her get into her car, hands on the wheel for a full minute before she actually started the engine, and I felt the particular grief of watching someone choose, again, not to do the right thing when it was sitting right in front of her. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because I was afraid of her. The forged document had been contained. The money was traceable. The case was moving. But because some small, stubborn part of me had spent 34 years hoping my mother would, eventually, choose differently. Watching her drive away instead of choosing differently one more time is its own kind of surgery. It doesn't show up on a monitor. It doesn't come with a recovery timeline. You just carry it. The warrant was executed the next morning. Sandra's forensic trail, the fundraiser payout, the joint account, the venue deposit, the boutique charge, all time-stamped and cross-referenced, combined with Detective Chen's forgery investigation, which had by then confirmed that Carla Ibarra was a real notary in a county 2 hours away, who had never notarized a single document for my mother, and whose stamp had, in fact, been used fraudulently by someone who'd purchased a counterfeit seal online 18 months earlier. The charges when they came were specific. Forgery of a notarized legal instrument, 2 counts, 1 per attempted presentation, fraud by wire in connection with the fundraiser proceeds, given the interstate nature of GoFundMe's payment processing, and, for my mother alone, attempted financial exploitation of a minor's trust, a charge Priya told me exists in exactly the kind of state statute nobody expects to need until they need it badly. Lauren was charged separately and more narrowly. She hadn't forged anything herself, but she'd knowingly used fraudulently obtained funds for the venue deposit and the boutique charge after admitting in a recorded interview with Detective Chen that she'd known the fundraiser money wasn't wasn't really for medical bills, but had told herself Miles's surgery was covered anyway, so it wasn't really hurting him. I want to sit on that sentence for a second because it's the one that finally broke something loose in me. It wasn't really hurting him, as if 211 strangers hadn't opened their wallets in good faith, as if a 7-year-old's stolen photo hadn't funded a champagne toast 17 minutes into his open-heart surgery. The logic wasn't even sophisticated. It was just convenient. And convenience, I was learning, is the entire engine some people run their whole lives on. The GoFundMe platform, once the fraud was confirmed through the police report Detective Chen provided, suspended the campaign permanently, refunded the roughly $1,400 still sitting untouched in the fundraiser's own holding account directly to donors who requested it, and issued a public fraud notice on the campaign page. I watched the comments turn overnight, the same praying for this family energy converting, almost sentence for sentence, into "I want my money back and this is disgusting," using a sick child's photo. I didn't feel triumphant reading them. I felt tired and a little sick at how easily good faith had been weaponized in both directions. First by my mother, stealing it, and now, briefly, by strangers venting justified anger at a fundraiser page that no longer belonged to anyone who could hear them. Sandra's forensic report became the backbone of restitution proceedings. $9,800 recovered directly from the frozen joint account, with a court-ordered repayment structure for the remaining balance tied to Lauren's wages, since the venue and boutique had, after considerable back and forth with Priya's office, agreed to reverse the majority of both transactions once informed the deposits were made with funds under active criminal investigation. The Wilmington estate, to their credit, canceled the booking outright and returned $9,600 of the $11,200 deposit once their events director understood what she was holding. The trust itself was never breached. Priya filed a formal petition removing my mother as co-trustee entirely, citing the forged POA as evidence of unfitness, and the court granted it without a contested hearing. My mother's own criminal charges did most of that argument for us. A new co-trustee was appointed, David's older brother, Marcus Ward, who I hadn't spoken to much in the years since David died, mostly out of the ordinary drift of grief rather than any conflict, but who showed up to the hearing in a suit and cried quietly in the back row when the judge read the surgery timeline into the record. I didn't testify against my mother with any satisfaction. I want to be honest about that, because I think the versions of this story that end in triumph without cost are lying to you a little. I sat in a deposition room across from a court reporter and answered questions about my own mother's forged signature on my own name, and there is no clean feeling available in that chair. There's just the relief of the truth finally outweighing the performance, and underneath that relief, a grief that doesn't have anywhere else to go. It's been 9 months. Miles is doing well. His most recent echocardiogram with Dr. Farouche showed the valve repair holding exactly the way it's supposed to, and he's back to soccer 3 afternoons a week, technically not supposed to slide tackle and doing it anyway, which Dr. Farouche finds funnier than I do. He still sleeps with the stuffed fox, though it now sits on a shelf most nights instead of under his chin, which I understand is a 7-year-old's version of growing up gracefully. He asked about his grandmother twice in the first few months. I told him, in the plainest, gentlest words I could find, that Grandma had made some very serious mistakes with money that weren't his to worry about, and that grown-up problems sometimes mean people need space from each other for a while. He accepted that the way kids accept most things you tell them honestly, with more grace than the situation probably deserved. My mother pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution and a probationary sentence with mandatory financial counseling, avoiding trial largely because Sandra's paper trail left her attorney very little room to maneuver. Lauren's wedding to Todd happened 7 months later, smaller than planned, at a different venue, paid for, as far as I know, and I no longer keep close enough tabs to know for certain. Without my mother's help, I wasn't invited. I didn't expect to be, and if I'm honest, I wouldn't have gone. I still work in claims. I still spend my days finding the places where a story doesn't match its documentation. It turns out I got very good practice for it at home, which is not the kind of professional development anyone puts on a resume, but it's the truest one I've ever had. The bank fraud alert that started all of this, the small linked card charge I almost didn't call about, sits in my memory now as the strangest kind of gift. If I hadn't picked up the phone about 50 cents worth of nothing, I don't know how long it would have taken to find the rest. Miles asked me last week, apropos of nothing, while we were doing dishes, whether Grandma was ever going to come to one of his soccer games again. I don't know, buddy, I told him, because it was true, and because I'd promised myself a long time ago that whatever else changed, I wouldn't lie to him the way he'd been lied to that morning in the hospital when the people who should have shown up chose a boutique fitting room instead. That's okay, he said, lacing up his cleats. You showed up. That's the one that counts. I think about that sentence more than I think about the forged signature or the fundraiser or the deposition room. Out of everything that week tried to take from him, that's the one thing it never touched. He was 7 years old, and he already knew the difference between who says they'll be there and who actually is. I'm hoping it takes him a lot longer than 7 to need to know that difference again.